Kia ora, and welcome to Walking the Shadowlands podcast. Let me be your guide as we take a walk into the shadowy realms of the unexplained, of the paranormal, of things that go bump in the night and haunt your dreams.
Your hosts?
I'm Marianne. Thanks so much for joining us today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. Sit back, relax, and let me be your guide as we walk into the Shadowlands together and see what awaits us there. Hi everyone, welcome back. It's great to have you all here with us in this, our 6th season of the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. A special welcome to all our new listeners. I just want to take a minute to thank you all so very much. Each of you has helped to place this podcast in the top 10% of podcasts globally, according to listennotes.com. That's so amazing and completely blew me away when I saw that on their website, and I have to say has given me the impetus to continue creating content you all want to listen to. I'm very grateful to each and every one of you who listens to and shares this podcast. Have you ever wondered what it's like for those who make a living purchasing and on-selling antiques? Items that somebody once loved and treasured in their lives. Have you ever wondered why it was so loved? Everything we purchase and collect in our lives tells a story about us, our loves, likes or dislikes. It informs others about what is and isn't important to us in terms of our physical realities. And because of the love we have for some of these physical, tangible items, how much of our personal energy remains with that item when it's no longer in our possession? Can non-living items have spiritual attachments? Have you ever experienced that with something second-hand or pre-loved that you brought into your life and your home? Our next episode is all about so-called haunted items, but in this episode, we're taking a peek behind the curtains and into the life of our guest, who owns the biggest multi-dealer antiques market in Chicago. But the question, as always, is, are you willing to walk with me into this part of the Shadowlands and see what awaits us there? Then let's begin. Today, on our first episode of Season 6, I've a very special guest, one who is the author of the #1 best-selling vintage retailing book, Selling Dead People's Things, and a co-owner of the Broadway Antique Market, Chicago's oldest and largest multi-dealer antique store. He's the co-owner, the marketing director, and copywriter for Broadway Antiques Market. Duane is the founder of the 80s house music label Persona Records and the artist known as Danny Alias. He's also a comic and blogger, a published poet, and a produced playwright, amongst other things. Also simply a very lovely gentleman whom I've enjoyed talking with greatly. My special guest, Duane Scott Cerny. Thank you very much for joining us today, Duane. I've been really looking forward to our conversation. I read your book,
Selling Dead People's Things.
Selling Dead People's. I read your book and I absolutely loved it. I laughed and I could really relate to a lot of what you had to say there. So perhaps we could start by you giving us a little bit of background on how you got into the area of dealing with secondhand, pre-loved items.
Sure. When I was 30, I had a paralegal company, and which is just typing. And I had said to myself, I just wasn't happy. I simply was not happy. And on the side, I would go to sales and thrift stores, like a lot of people do, resale shops. And that's how I decorated my apartment. I wouldn't buy anything new. If I could buy old food, I would. So everything was used in vintage and whatever. And I would go to antique stores, but not really, just to look at things. I didn't really have a whole lot of money. But I just loved that. I would do that on the weekends. I just realized I was just so unhappy doing what I was doing. So I used to go to a store, and then a big antique store in Chicago as a customer, and shop. And the woman who was the owner's wife was very sweet, but a bit of a chatty Cathy. And we just kind of became friends. She asked me what I would do, and I said, I'm a paralegal, and I write and I do advertising and copy for businesses. And the one time I came in, and she said, would you try to help us advertise and promote the store? And I thought, well, gee, that would be kind of cool because it's two things I am interested in. Mm-hmm. And then she says, we don't have any money, but we'll give you a space in the store to sell your things. And again, I don't know what I'm doing. Clueless, really, on that end of it. So I then had, stuff and then a place to sell it, but really not any knowledge of doing this. And they gave me this little booth in the basement. And that's how I actually started, professionally selling to the public. So you couldn't start any lower level than the bottom of the stairs in a basement.
Right.
Yeah.
And you, obviously, I can see the screen behind you. Looks very Art Deco-ish.
Yes, I love deco.
Oh, yeah. Me too. I live in a city. The city I live in, Napier, was destroyed by a massive earthquake in the 30s, and they rebuilt it almost totally in Art Deco style.
Wow. What's the name of the city?
Napier, New Zealand.
Napier, New Zealand. Okay. Gonna check that out. And Napier, yeah. There's a brand of sterling silver is Napier as well. So I'll remember.
Right.
The screen was from a pool house. These people had an indoor pool, and this is where the screen you'd go behind to get into your bathing suit. So.
Oh, it's great! I loved it.
So am I. So yeah.
I noticed it right away when you came up on screen. Yeah. I actually noticed it before I noticed you.
What is that? How much is it? Right.
It's fabulous. So you got into you started selling your pre-loved items, and it kind of went from there, didn't it?
Yeah. And I was selling 50s things. Things from the 1950s. So,
right.
So, and this is 1988. Yeah, about 1988. And then they had the people who owned the store, and there were like 100 dealers who had rented space, but this was my deal. And then I became basically the assistant manager there. So I was able to learn a lot, like just very quickly. And then they had said, there's a guy who wants to have a space here, but he lives up in Wisconsin, so he couldn't take care of a booth. He's got the merchandise, but he couldn't, he couldn't do the retail end of it. And so they introduced us, and that was my future business partner, Jeff, which I write about in the book.
Right.
And so that was we were the perfect pair for this. And then we just kind of went crazy for like a couple years, a very short amount of time, which meaning that, whenever we had time, we would run around really most of the Midwest and Chicago, all the surrounding states of Illinois. So Indiana and Kentucky and Wisconsin, of course, and Iowa, so all the surrounding, middle states, and just bring all this stuff to Chicago, down into that basement. And then we started actually renting space from these owners. So we just got bigger and bigger and bigger. So we had about like a third of the basement.
Wow.
And then that place went out of business, which was another whole experience. And I write about that in the book, what it's like to fail. Because you learn more in life from the things that don't go well than things that do. That's what
actually you do. And they're all learning experiences, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, when you're in the good times, you go like, hey, that's great, feeling lucky. But when you need to like turn it all around, that's the challenge. And you really find out even like who you are. You just learn a lot about yourself.
Actually, you do. That's a very valid point. And I remember reading in your book that you guys, like, while you were really stressed about the situation, you turned it around into a positive.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It was, the expression at the time was that we needed a lifeboat. And I think that expression that, oh, gosh, look who I'm talking to today, right? Your situation, pardon the metaphor. But really just in life, just to have a lifeboat, which is really just, a plan. It's like a what if. What if this doesn't go well? You don't have to go crazy about it, but it's always good to be there because you might need it. And that's what this turned out to be. And then, we were able to secure a lease on a little store across the street from the old store. So just like 1,500 square feet, this very small store, where the other store was, 15,000 square feet easily. So it's just this little slice of a store. And we brought like 10 dealers with us. Everybody said yes. So we quickly opened up, but we weren't a success right off the bat because people were just used to the old place and they didn't even realize we were there. So which I also learned is, do you think, I'm just moving across the street, it'll be the same business. Oh, dude, not what happened. Location, as they say. So no, it was just trial by fire there, But then every basically year to 6 months, we'd get another store and another store. And then we took the lower level and we became almost as big as the place that we had left, except now, we were renting, but we owned the business though.
Right.
Yeah, we weren't just people renting space, one little space, renting all this space for like $10,000 a month by the time we left, which again,
that's a lot of money.
Which is like by 1998. So 10 years in doing it, rough and tough at that time. But, and this was by the ballpark. You're familiar with American baseball, by Wrigley Field and Cubs Park. So that's where the store was located. And the store then was called Wrigleyville. So we kind of cashed in on the whole baseball crowd coming, which helped a little, but not a lot. And that was actually our first store. And then in '98, we actually bought a building, which I write about in the book as well. I think it's interesting, if I may, because the book to me is just as much about just business, what it's like just to be in business and be self-employed. And I've certainly tried to bring in as many of the like odd, true stories and circumstances and people and things that we had over the years. But, to me, kind of at its core, it's still very much a business book. I don't think most people don't really view it that way, but I do. No, reading it is a journey. I saw it as a journey, and I actually found it really interesting. It actually ties in with my podcast type because of some of the experiences that you had later on, or actually one was fairly early on, wasn't it? But yeah, I see it as the growth, your business growth certainly, but also your personal growth and in a degree your spiritual growth as well, because you perhaps became more aware of other realities of being than you would have been otherwise. So it's an overall thing, really. And I can see why most people don't see it as a business book, because it's your personal journey. Yes. And those again, as you mentioned, there's, 4 or 5, paranormal type stories that are in the book, but then these are things that actually happen. And I think in a way that even for, those that don't believe in these things, I think the book gives it a lot of credence and credibility. Because these are my experiences. And again, there's a few things that happened to me, and this is over 30 some years. So people,
Right.
people look at this and think these things happen every day, and they do not. They do happen to other people every day. And I write about that. So there's other people telling me their experiences, which that's always saying, well, I can't explain what happened, but I will tell their story. And
Right.
that's the other thing, which to your point, I learned about that, and just being, I'm not an empath, but I am empathic. And I feel I'm a good listener, and I'm not as sensitive, but I am sensitive. So I feel like that. So I think it's kind of putting the toe in the water, which was never my intent, but these are just the experiences. These are just things that happen to me. And then it's, it's 25 some chapters, and it's, all different topics.
All different topics. I really liked the way you actually laid it out, actually. Now, I remember the first experience that you talked about in your book was with your friend's father's death.
Yes, right.
Maybe for our listeners, would you mind telling that story? Because it was absolutely fascinating.
So, yeah, and that was many years ago. So this is my friend from college, and I was close with his family, and they were very sweet to me. And so I knew his dad well. And we were both Pisces. And he would tease me about that, but he had many health problems, and he was diabetic, and the poor man, it was just Job. It was just, he lost a leg and he went blind. It's just, but a beautiful human being and funny guy. And when he passed, they had a shiva. The family was Jewish, and I'm a Catholic boy here. I didn't really know much about that at all. And my friend had said, well, my mom's going to have to downsize. My dad has passed, and would you come to the shiva and just kind of look at her stuff and just see? And I was saying, I really don't want to do that. I'm just kind of uncomfortable with that. And he said, no, you don't have to tell anybody what to do it. Just look the things she has there, and she wants to see you anyway. And there's food. Well, that's all he had to say, and I was there, right? Okay. So, and basically, I want to give the whole thing away, but there was just a number of different circumstances occurred there. And what started was that during the middle of the Shiva, and again, this was a very jovial, almost a party. It was a festive event. It wasn't a sad passing at all. I mean, so it was the whole experience was very positive, really almost like a party. And then at one point, his mother lets out this scream, and my friend and I, ran into the bedroom where she was, and here the bed that they had was in the room had been with everyone's coats and jackets and hats and purses and all that. You go to somebody's house there at a party, everybody just lays their stuff on a bed, right? Right. Except we go in there and everything's on the floor. Everything. So it's just a big mess. And his mother's screaming, saying that, Myron did it again. Myron, it's Myron. He's here. I told you he's been doing this all day. And we're like, what? And my friend just thought his mother is kind of having a breakdown. That's not what happened. So then we ran around and just put everything back on the bed and thought, well, she's just having a really tough time. And she calmed down a little bit. And then maybe an hour or so into this function, I had to go to the bathroom. Ate too much chocolate kugel, and I went into the room, and the TV was on, which would seem kind of strange, and it wasn't on any station. It was just that static snow that you normally see on the televisions. And at some point, the TV was pretty much going. It was really going like on and off, and his mother had said that Myron was doing that, which was like. I just didn't believe that, although having the code experience was a little strange. And the volume getting louder and louder on the TV, the static. So it's just kind of creeping me out. So I pulled the plug out of the wall of the television going, okay, enough of that. Duane's taking care of it. We're all good, right? Yeah. And then the TV went back on. And then I tell you this, and I still get goosebumps telling it. And the TV went back on. And she said, see? Well, yeah, I saw. And her son came in and saw, and we went, wow, he's like really here. He was a bit of a joker, and I left shortly after that. And other things happened, but that was, and even after, from what I understand, a couple weeks and months had passed, and things would still happen to her for Myron, which kind of would just annoy her more than anything else. Like, hey, you're just freaking me out. Stop it, she just recently passed a few years ago. So she lived many, many years, never parted with anything. Someone for downsizing. But that was one of the, I would say, few personal experiences. I was there that was just, again, inexplicable. I don't know what that was about, but
that would have been really scary to see the TV go on and it's not even plugged into any power.
Yeah, a very poltergeist kind of moment. Yeah. And then the volume of the TV too, because it just got louder and louder, and that was just so unnerving. That is a thing though. I mean, as I've talked to other people messing with lights and electrical fields, I mean, this is where they get energy to make things happen too. So
it's very common for spirit to use digital and electrical devices because we're at our base, we're all energy. And when you leave this physical body, your energy, so it's easy for them to manipulate stuff like that. That's absolutely.
I think you'll appreciate this. It's taken me many years to go in, like, what was that even about? And I've come up with a question, because when I've been interviewed before, and even people it's great to talk to somebody who believes in this, as opposed to, I'm not trying to convince anybody, I'm just going, this is what happened. But when I've been interviewed and people have truly questioned it, I ask the question, can the paranormal be defined as nature showing off?
Oh, that's a good question.
And to me, because it normalizes it. It's just something we don't understand. And nature shows off all the time. Nature's showing off apparently out your window right now, doing crazy things. And I think the paranormal really falls into that. And it's just, when I say showing off, it's saying that I'm here. Just pay attention to me. I'm trying to communicate as best I can. So, yeah. But it's taken me many years to come up with that.
Yeah. And that's a good way of looking at it. Well, I look at it like this. I look at it from a scientific perspective, okay? The first law of physics is that energy never dies. It simply changes form.
Yes. Yeah.
And we at our core are just energy. And this body that we use is just a vehicle, like a car we use for a specific purpose. And then when it's no longer necessary, we discard it and move on.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
Yeah.
So over the years, and I meant to ask you before, was your market, was it just a weekend only market, or was it open during the week as well?
Oh, open every day.
Every day.
Open every day. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you would have seen a lot of items pass through, and I remember reading in your book, I could tell by the way you were talking about your interaction with people that you brought stuff off, that you have this really deep compassion, and you're not just out there to make a buck. You actually care about the people that you're dealing with, and that came through very clearly to me. I could feel that very clearly from the words that you wrote in your book.
Yeah, thank you. I do. I do. I mean, even in my store now, and sometimes if I feel comfortable enough to say something to somebody, I will. I don't always say this, but I truly believe that in so many ways that the items pick the person. Not that you always think, oh, I'm going out and I'm going to go shopping and I'm going to pick up, fill in the blank. But that's not really how I don't think antiques always work that way. I think a lot of times the item picks you equally.
Yeah.
And I've had people shop the store and buy something and say, I don't even know why I'm buying this, but it speaks to me.
Right.
Expression, right? And people say it speaks to me. Well, a cocktail shaker didn't speak to you. A set of mixing bowls didn't speak to you. Or did they? In their own way. It was just, I think they decided who they're going to go home with. It's almost like a kitten or a puppy going like, yes, I'm comfortable with this person. Yes. Yeah. There's just more to the retail, of it. And in here now, I have a very big store, and we sell hundreds of items, certainly over a weekend. And I'm not saying this is in every transaction, not at all, because there are some people that I don't think are empathic to anybody themselves, right?
Yeah.
And also, I think when money is more the object, in other words, somebody buying something just to resell it, I think that equation is out. I don't think that's it at all. I think an item might not even want to be purchased by that person, but it's still happening. So I think the heart of it makes a big difference. I will tell you this because it kind of segues into it, and it's not in the book, but it's. I have a very good friend, and he's such a good soul, really an old soul, and just a lovely person. And I've seen this happen countless times with him. Is that we would be at a store or maybe an antique show or a flea market or something, and he runs to some item that just, again, speaks to him, and he'll just pick this up and go, I just love this. Now he's not buying it. It's just something about that, right? And then he sets it down. And I've seen this happen more times than I can count. If you stand there long enough, somebody will come along, and sometimes not all that long at all, and they'll pick it up and they'll buy it. And I've seen him do it in the store. And I think because there's this genuine energy which he expends into the item, right? And it's there. It's like the light bulb that went on, right? And then the next person who comes along, and really I've seen it sometimes within just a couple minutes, then why that thing? And it can be something in my store that has sat there for months and nobody's looked at it at all. But he touches it. And I think there are other people like that. Now, again, I think because it's genuine.
Yes.
Why it happens. If this was like, oh, I can make $1 on this, I could sell this for twice that amount, right? No, that's not his intent. That's not it. It's because he just has this passion for that item, and again, it spoke to him for whatever reason, and then it's kind of energized, and
absolutely.
And it's lovely. It's just lovely when that happens. And I mean, a little freaky, and again, people could not believe it. That's fine, but I do think there are just people who are they're special. I don't have that talent at all, but I'm observant, and I've seen it happen with other people too. And I think that's what it's about. Is there's just a lot of things that are happening around us, but we're not paying attention. There's just the world is in chaos now more than ever. Oh. So these little details can just kind of slip past, but they're still going on. Yeah. We're just not.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I want to go back to what you said about it coming from his heart and his intent, because that's something that I talk about a lot on this podcast, is intent and coming from your heart. There's a saying that I really love, and that's what comes from the heart touches the heart.
Yeah.
And whenever we touch anything, we leave our energy on it. No matter what it is, we leave energy behind. And so you're quite right in saying that people pick up on your friend's energy. And he's drawn to these items because of the energy on them to begin with.
Yes, right.
And I guess, and the impression that I get is that he acts like an amplifier.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. Yeah. And then it's amplified and magnified, and the next sensitive person who comes along is drawn to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And generally this is an unconscious thing. It's not something that they're consciously aware of, but they feel it in their body, which is, why you say, oh, it calls to me.
Yeah. And again, when people say, I don't even know why I'm buying this. And I've heard that countless times. And people say that I don't even need this, and I'm buying.
Right.
It's like, but that's how strong that intent is, and that energy, that amplification is, that people are just, maybe when they have their guard down too, then they can really hear, hear with their heart.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot. A very beloved friend once said to me, whenever you do anything, you must do it from your heart. And this is not a human that I'm talking about. You must do it from your heart. When you speak from your heart. When you listen from your heart. And you just have given a very good example of that effect.
Yeah, yes, and it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's reality. It's actually very human.
Very human.
And I don't think there's anything scary about that at all. I think it's lovely, actually. But
Not at all.
you know,
Yeah. Very lovely. Your friend sounds like he's really
he's
an awesome person.
the best. I hope he hears this someday.
Oh, so over your years now, you've been dealing with antiques for decades now.
Yeah, 30 years.
30 years, that's a long time. And you would have you had many of your clients or people that you're purchasing from tell you about things that may be attached to their items? Apart from what you've written in your book, and I don't want to go into all the experiences in your book because obviously we want people to go out and
give away some of the good parts. Yes. Certainly, the book has brought that out. That people can go and have to tell me their stories, and it can often be the most curious of items too. It's not. I know people always often gravitate to that. There's energy put into, like, let's say dolls and things like that.
Right.
Of course there are. That's certainly a thing. But I've heard people talk about pieces of jewelry, vintage clothing. To me, there's almost seems to be a stronger connection with things that are actually touch the body as something that you would use. But then I can see why that would happen with dolls, things like that. And then people relate stories about things that they've inherited. I'll mention another thing that's kind of occurred to me as I've heard some of these stories. There's always the old adage, just like if there was a fire, what item would you save?
Right.
And I kind of turn it around again, especially to disbelievers, and I'll say, if there was a fire, what item would save you? And I think it's a way to get kind of very introspective with your own possessions and what they mean to you. And I think that's really one of the themes of the book too, is I'm trying to make people look at things, their objects in their life, just to kind of open their eyes about all this stuff. We have all this stuff in our life, but nothing got there by a coincidence. Everything I'm looking at, even in the room behind you, there's a story. Certainly that piece of art I'm looking at, I'm sure there's a story, and there's a reason, and what it means to you. And then that's a piece of the puzzle of you, Marianne, and that's what makes you you. And that's the screen is part of me, obviously. It just reflects it, and more than just even like having an interest in something. I think it goes well beyond that. So what we were talking about earlier, but I think this energy that's expended, into objects is resilient. And to, as I talk about in the book, to an object, to a piece of jewelry or a toy, time means nothing. Time is a very human element that we, understandably, plug into the equation. But to an object, time, it's
there's no such thing as time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They just go on and on. This will go on. Somebody else will have this, People sometimes don't like thinking about that, because I'm not being morbid about it. I'm just saying I think it's kind of great that these things, certainly things that that you loved in your life, that they go on, and whether it's relatives or even total strangers, I think that's fantastic.
It is. And it's no surprise that sometimes there are spiritual attachments to objects that people loved and meant a lot to them, because their love for that object, that necklace, that hat, that whatever, is the energy is attached to that because they loved that. And so they put that energy into that item.
Exactly.
So it's no surprise that even after they've moved on from this reality, that they might still perhaps come back and visit because it means something to them.
Yes. And how can that energy, for the most part, we're talking about good energy, how can that not be love? Which is really one of the most, almost an impossible thing to measure. So
Yeah.
when people go and, question the paranormal, it's how do you measure that? How do you measure love?
Yeah, exactly.
Um, uh, so yeah, I totally believe that. I may visit the screen 40, 50 years from now. Hope it's having a good time. Yeah, and check in on things.
Yeah.
Why not?
And why not? And so in your years, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you?
So, good question. It was the most. This was the most scariest thing, and also the most beautiful thing. So in 2000, my sister and mother passed 5 years apart. And I had moved home to be with my mom, and then my sister passed while I was taking care of my mom. It was a very difficult couple of years there. And when it was all done, and I inherited my sister's poodle. It's an important part of this story, as I inherited my sister's poodle. And like as time went on, I kept like hoping there would be some message, something would happen, and nothing happened. And I was kind of annoyed about it, honestly, just because I just wanted something. And on the 5th anniversary, and it was of Christmas, I'm alone in the apartment, and and I'm there with the dog. And I got to admit, I was absolutely feeling sorry for myself. I just don't like the holidays. I never, just kind of bummed. And I walked into my kitchen, and I'm in a big apartment building, and you never like smell anything from another unit, like even cooking and things like that. They're big apartments. But I go into the kitchen, and it was like you had stuck your head into the biggest bouquet of flowers you could imagine. I couldn't see it, but it was huge. And for hours, it was there. And I kept telling myself, I didn't understand what it was at first. And I'm being honest with you, Marianne, this is what I did, because I couldn't think of what else to do. I picked up the poodle, and I would hold it into the flower scent that was like a ball of aroma. And of course, the dog would be sniff, sniff, sniff. Yeah, going like, okay, it was a validation, though. It's just not me. I'm going crazy here. And then for a couple hours, I just stayed in the kitchen. And it was, again, though this is not an optical thing, it was totally sensory. But it was like the ball of aroma got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, And afterwards, I thought about it. I mean, even through it, I was going, this must be them. This has to be them. This has to be a message of some sort. And it being in the kitchen, my mother loved to cook. My sister loved to bake. It was right around the stove. And again, there are no flowers in my apartment. It's nothing. I don't cook, so there's no sense coming from me. But the fact that little dog would just go crazy over what that was. And that evening, I called the gentleman whose story I first told about his father who'd passed. I couldn't think of who else to call. That I could explain this, and they wouldn't think that I'm crazy. And he was like, "Oh, it's them. It's them." Yeah. So it was scary because I just couldn't explain it. And again, I'd had a couple experiences, but nothing that emotional either. I mean, I was a mess. It was still one of the most really lovely things I think that's ever happened to me. Yeah.
I can see that. I can feel that. And that is a very, very common way that spirit lets their loved one know that they're around through the sense of smell. Your mum and your sister obviously liked flowers, smelly flowers.
And they would plant flowers. Afterwards, it kind of all made sense.
There you go.
They would plant flowers on my father's grave. I mean, plantings of things. And that was a thing they would do every year, because he had died 7 years prior. They were out at the cemetery. All the flowers were a big part of it. But again, at the time, I wasn't making the connection.
You wouldn't, because it's out of your normal paradigm of reality. So you had to step out of your normal way of thinking to understand that and I believe that they came at that point in time to give you the comfort that you needed.
Yeah, and I've never told the story before because nobody's asked. So, hey,
wow. That's a beautiful story, and certainly it brought tears to my eyes because I knew straight away.
And again, following that, then of course Googling it, that's a thing.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really know that was and that's a huge thing. But I'm so glad that I still had, because that little dog meant everything, because it was the connection into my whole family. You know, that's
right.
You know, that's all I had.
Yeah.
And but just the picture of the two of us both sticking our heads into this invisible cloud of aroma, you know, and pulling it back, and to do that for an hour or two is crazy.
That's pretty amazing because generally they don't last around that long. Generally, it's only like a couple of minutes, or just long enough for you to be aware of it, and then it will dissipate.
Right. And of course, now I'm always going. I still live in the same apartment. It's never happened again. You know.
Oh wow.
Now.
That's really lovely. That's really lovely that happened to you. That's and while it was scary at the time, in the general scheme of things, it's not really scary.
No.
It was comforting.
Yes. Yeah. Once I accepted it. Yeah. And again, chapter of the book: be careful what you wish for. You know. Yeah. Because life is like that too. Like you really want something. Well, it will come, but not on your timetable.
And perhaps not entirely as you expected either.
No, exactly. True.
Yeah, I really liked the way you labeled your chapters in your book. It was quite interesting because it then followed, the chapter then followed on from that sort of heading, you know. It was a good segue into the chapter. So it was really cool. One of the things, and one of the other paranormal experiences in your book that jumped out at me, and I don't want to go too much detail into it because people can read it for themselves, but it was the hospital visit.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's the Edgewater Hospital, correct? That's what you're referring to? Yeah. This is something where it was somewhat near actually our present location. So it was a giant old hospital that they were getting rid of all the furniture in there. It was mostly office chairs and desks, but this had been a hospital. It had been actually built as a hotel, which I didn't know until we met with the guy who took us through the place. And it was a fairly well-known hotel at the time. And then it had fallen in disrepair, and this doctor bought it as his own private hospital. And it had a Hollywood connection that people from Hollywood, if they needed the stars to like dry out, so that they would have their own like private room. And then you're in Chicago, which is like where great place to get lost is Chicago. And so it had all these different like incarnations. And that was Dr. Morris Maisel. If anyone wants to Google it, it's Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. I don't know of any paranormal teams that had ever gone through there. I'd always kind of hoped somebody would. I don't want to give too much away, but part of it was when we went through it, and again, it's 500,000 square feet. I mean, it's enormous. 8 stories tall, and the top floor had these swimming pools, because again, it had been a very lavish hotel at one time.
Right.
But then they turned some of the rooms over there into like operating rooms. And when we were there, I heard this dog barking and dogs whimpering, which is weird because I'm 7 stories up in this abandoned hospital.
Yeah.
And the dog seemed right there. It seemed very nearby. And so one of any number of things that happened myself and to other people who've been there, but then when we were dealing with the gentleman who was the manager and was trying to get rid of all this furniture, and then I'd asked him about what's with the dog. What's the dog? You have security guards, the dogs here? Because that was my guess. Maybe it's at night, security dogs, and maybe they keep them upstairs or something. And the guy said, no, everybody talks about that. Everybody hears that. And I was like, well, why? Well, what is it? And then he said that this Dr. Maisel had experimented with just disgusting, but still is what happened, medical experiments with animals, and like replacing of limbs, severed limbs and legs, and and they used animals, and eventually used dogs. And so people would often hear dogs that had been their hospital. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's actually not uncommon to hear animals. I have a paranormal investigation team here in New Zealand, and we did an investigation one time in a hotel. And there were 5 of us in this particular room, and we all had our microphones, our recorders going, and only one member of the team picked up this cat meow. And we all had our recorders going, but it only recorded on his recorder. And I was listening to it back, and I thought it was my cat. And I was looking around for him, then I realised it was as clear as like your dog bark.
Yeah.
So it's actually really good for people to know who have animals that they love, that actually they do continue on just as we do.
Yeah. Why not? It's a life form. Yeah. I do have not a paranormal update to it, but as anybody's wants to Google it, because they've since they tore down half the place and the other half is still there. So the main part that was the hotel has been remodeled, and they haven't, because of COVID, everything's a mess.
Right.
But they're opening it up, I think, as a kind of a high-end rental apartment complex.
Oh, that's going to be interesting.
That's going to be very interesting. That's going to be very interesting, because there are, any number of things that happen there. I make reference to the painting in the lobby of Dr. Mizell.
That's what I was thinking.
Very much there.
Yeah.
Very much there, and not always happy. And any number of people have had run-ins with him, but not necessarily knowing that he's a spirit.
Right.
I didn't see him, but a number of people have, and I write about that. So that's going to be an interesting development.
That will be very interesting, because I was thinking about him specifically when you said that they'd turned it into high-end apartments. I was thinking, oh, he's not going to be very happy with that, and he's going to make himself known to people.
Oh, yeah.
Happy. And he doesn't like smoking anyway.
No.
No. And he was a bit of a control freak, is what I get the impression of.
Even to do that, I mean, the whole idea of, even now, I mean, for somebody to buy a huge building and make it your own private hospital, I mean, does that, right?
Yeah.
Personality right there to do that. And to make it work and be, really successful at it, until he wasn't, until things changed. His business model changed. He needed a lifeboat. We'll go back to that, right? But I drive past it, maybe twice a week now, because they haven't opened it up yet, and it looks lovely. With what they've done with it, since they retained so much of the original structure. But oh boy, I can't believe there wouldn't be activity there.
Yeah, no, I can't either.
I'm sure the developer doesn't want to talk about that.
Yeah, no, of course. I'm sure the workmen, while they were working on it, had heaps of experiences. I bet they had trouble keeping staff. I bet they did when they were building it.
Good point. Yes.
Yeah. Because, you're just down tools and leave. You wouldn't stay when, somebody suddenly appears.
Right. See ya.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Very cool. So you the second business, well, when you got your business going and you closed that and you brought your new building, which is an Art Deco building also, wasn't it?
1939, yes.
1939, and that's the BAM market?
It's the Broadway Antique Market. Yeah.
And that's still going today, open on the weekends?
Open on the weekends, yeah.
Yeah. And I actually checked out your website, and I wish I was living there, because I'd love to go through and have a look. I love recycling items. That's something that's a big thing here in New Zealand. We do that a lot here. And I guess it's the old waste not, want not adage,
Well, and what's great too is that this is a whole new market, because younger people, and by that I mean, let's just say people under 30, are totally green, are all about green, and they're having a smaller footprint, and they're recyclers. And so these are people who buy used goods. You don't want to buy something at IKEA or something that was made with, God forbid, child labor or things like that. So you get into a vintage market is just perfect. So, and I was a little surprised because I kept thinking, there's kind of an aging demographic of collectors. So there's lots of things which do not sell anymore because older people used to buy it. I don't know, milk glass. I get depression wear. I can start putting things out. Who cares? Just categories that just don't sell anymore. But oh my gosh, like vintage vinyl. Young people are all over that. Vintage clothing. It's all about style and fashion. The vintage business is all about fashion. I mean, it is the fashion. So, but they were also very interested in cooking and cooking at home. Well, there you go. So talking about selling, mixing bowls or dinnerware, anything related to cooking, kitchenware. We sell so much of that. So it's just changed. What sells changed, and the market changed, and you go with that.
And you adapt it, right.
I have to explain to people like how to use a rotary phone. I guess I should go this way. What's a what? I put my finger where? I do what? So
I crack up every time I hear that. A lot of kids these days don't even know what it is.
No.
They're just used to the push button.
Or even we saw a lot of typewriters, and they only just because they just want a typewriter. They just want a typewriter. They're not going to use it. They'll even say, well, how do I said, well, you have a keyboard, you know how to type, but they look at it like, they're going to break it. Which is very much more like just kind of we call those like a shelf sitter.
Right.
Saying that, a shelf sitter, because they want it. It evokes all kinds of things. People say they love the feel of it when they type, the sound that it makes. There's just a lot of things that are just kind of, genuine.
Very sensory.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not all about this. It's a different experience. And the other thing I have to point out is that when you're for all the thousands of photos that we use this to take our photos, how many do we print up? How many do we
exactly?
Yeah, we sell. Images, photography, black and white snapshots, people's travels, or oh my gosh, cameras and photography. But images are objects. Photographs are objects. They become an object. I mean, when people took a camera and then they had film developed, and you had a print of it, it became an object. We don't do that anymore. That's like lost. Yeah, you're posting it on Instagram or whatever, but then
it's not the same.
It's not the same.
No.
And young people get that. Young people totally get that. When they don't, I explain it to them. Because I was doing this for a long time going, no, this is going to be a thing. These prints, because people from, oh my gosh, certainly everything was very formal with photography before the turn of the century. And then by like the teens and the 20s, they were fun. This was all about having fun and dressing up and being goofy. And so the images you find of people doing crazy things is very common. And they enjoyed it. It was a new technology, and they played with it. They had fun with it. And then they created an object, which we still, 100 years later, here it is.
Yeah.
Which, I'm not being funny, but I don't think there's anything necessarily I'm going to be creating, maybe it's another book, which somebody's going to have 100 years from now that reflects me.
Yeah.
So, they used to call them like lost relatives. Why do people buy these photographs? But no, they're very much with us in these objects. So,
and again, it's the energy.
Yes. Yeah.
I know there are some Native American tribes who won't allow their photographs to be taken. Won't allow their photographs to be taken because of the energy. Because of the energy attached to the photograph.
Right. That it's taking a piece of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah. I've heard that.
Yeah, and I can understand actually where that comes from, because you do imprint your energy, and quite often actually spirit can also imprint their energy onto photos. Like, have you ever come across any photos in your travels that have spirit images in them?
Yes. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a few. I'll send you a few. There's one of my favorites is there's a guy who's standing with, and it's probably like from the 50s. So it's just a black and white snapshot, just somebody, and it would have been, it's his like violin collection. They're laid out next to him, and so I'm very proud of his violins, except you can see the kind of the music coming out of each violin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's like, and it's not a photo error either. You could just, how would you even do this?
Right. Yeah. Right. And back in the 50s, they didn't have the manipulation.
Photoshop or anything like that. No. Yeah. And then, or a spirit image, something behind them, or at the forefront of the image. I love when I stumble onto that. Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to see them. If you could send me some, I'll actually put them on this episode's page on the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com, so people can see them for themselves.
Yeah, I'll dig around and see where I have those.
That'll be awesome. I actually wondered, because in all your going through all these images, you had to have come across some that you could not explain.
Yes.
And back in those days, they just didn't have I'm sure they could do double exposures, but you can sort of tell double exposures.
Right. And also it's just from how it was made and where it was found, and he's going like, no. They weren't thinking, oh, we're gonna pull a hoax on people 50 years into the future. Nobody. There was nothing to be gained by that.
Absolutely. Oh, that's really exciting. Oh, that's right. And it must have been quite an interest for you when you discover these.
Yes,
particular
I did a couple years back. I did a Facebook post on a whole bunch of them that I put together. That's why I have to dig around and see where I still have those. But that's even before I bought the book. It was more like, hey, have you had anything like this, seen anything like this? And then some other people shared some of their pictures with me, some of which were legitimate and others I kind of questioned, just to kind of create a dialogue there.
How cool is that? Very cool. Okay, so you have your market website. Would you like to give out your social media details for my listeners?
Sure. Well, you can, if you're interested in the book, which is Selling Dead People's Things, you can just go to sellingdeadpeoplesthings.com and order a copy there. You can also get it on Amazon, and you can order it. The store is Broadway Antique Market. And so on Facebook, it's Broadway Antique Market Chicago. On Instagram, it's BAM Chicago. That's BAM Chicago. And there's some great stuff that we were a little late to Instagram, but we've been catching up. And also, too, this is representative of the whole store. It's not just my interests. It represents, I have 75 some dealers. So it's kind of, I would say it's the best of our best that we put out there as kind of representative examples of some of the things that we carry. And it's all types of things. We sell a lot of furniture and art, but it can be like almost anything that kind of strikes our fancy. Last week, we just put up a picture of, we had a painting, which we couldn't figure out what it was. And then we realized that it was a painting of the demolition of the Edgewater Beach Hotel in Chicago. And that was another very famous place, Edgewater Beach Hotel. People want to Google that. And there was a hotel and there was an apartment complex, big pink buildings. And so we just put that up because someone actually did a painting of the building as they were tearing it down. And that's what an unusual subject matter. I like odd things, obviously, and unusual things. So I always think if it speaks to me, it's going to speak to somebody else.
True. Yep. And Instagram is quite a good platform, but it's hard doing social media. I admit I struggle with my social media for the podcast.
Hashtags. It's just awful.
I know, maybe that's an our era thing or something. But
people can also contact me on Facebook. So that's Duane Scott Cerny. That's probably the best way somebody wants to get hold of me. Yeah.
Cool. I was going to ask, do you have a specific way people can get a hold of you? Because I'm sure 50% of my listeners are in the US. So I'm sure that you will get some people contact you after this. Now, there was another question I had for you. Oh, yes. Now, in your market that you currently have you had any unexplained happenings in your market?
Okay, good question. So this is a building that was built in 1939 as a furniture store, and they actually made the furniture there and then sold it there. And that was the Pakins. That was P-A-K-A-N. And so it's a family. And then they sold it to Mr. Mann, and then Mr. Mann sold the building to my partner and I. And the second floor were all showrooms. So when we got it, the showrooms had been shuttered for like 20 years, which was very cool. Because everything's falling apart, but it was still very cool to open up doors that nobody had been in for all that time. So, and initially, nothing had happened to me or my staff, but customers would comment about upstairs. It's always one area upstairs, and the questions would be, is there someone else working upstairs? And then we go, well, no, do you need some help? And they said, no, but I just thought somebody was watching me or following me. It tended to be younger women who would say this, and that probably happened a dozen times if it happened once. And then one of my employees who didn't believe in this at all, and even if I said it happened, sure, Dwayne, sure. But he was closing up one night, and he said someone called out his name. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, and I thought, well, maybe that I was still downstairs and I was calling for him, but I'd already left. He told me about it the next day, and it was like, that's interesting. And he says, well, and it felt like it was like right in my ear. I was like, okay. And now other people have mentioned that too, that somehow it seems to be an intelligent, haunt.
Right. My
one thing, which I'd say that this kind of spooked me. Same thing when I'm closing up for the night. And it sounded as if like a giant mirror had fallen off the wall, like right next to me. And I mean, I thought something fell off the wall. Stuff falls off the wall all the time. And something broke. And I'm looking around, and there is nothing. There's nothing. And when it happened again, it did happen again, it was the same thing, but that time it sounded like if you had a big handful of keys, like your house keys, and you dropped them on the concrete, it would make that sound, right? Except it's carpeting. There's one that shouldn't make that sound. And again, it sounded like it was right there. And people have talked about that, of hearing this like little crash. So there's definitely something there. What I've learned is that particular part of the building was turned into an apartment during the war. So people lived there. And that makes sense.
It does.
But when people ask about, with all these objects and items and furniture, lighting, everything, going in and out, that there wouldn't be like these residual energy of that, because I can never say in this store there was any one particular thing, where that's happened. But I think it might be a trigger to it. So yeah. Yeah, we've never really gone any further in like exploring it. We've talked about it, like what is that, but it's been again perfectly harmless. So
yeah. I feel that you would feel if it was malevolent in any way, you would feel that, and you don't get that feeling at all.
No. It's more I'm trying to get your attention. And
absolutely.
I did have the one time where I thought somebody had called my name, and then I just assumed it was somebody from downstairs. Right. What do you want? I go, what do you mean? What do I want?
Right.
So you just called for me. So that seems to be, a thing. So it's actually it just makes it kind of makes sense just with the history of the building, and it was built as a furniture store, and now it's a vintage furniture store. So. This is a property it's come full circle, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So what you could do with your guest in your house is you could go up to that area and acknowledge him. Mm-hmm. Say, I know you're here, and we can coexist as we have been, but we just want you to be aware that we know that you're here.
Yeah, that's a good idea, because I've never done that. I'm always just trying to settle all the fires around me.
Yeah. Well, of course you could be.
I should take time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Acknowledge this entity.
Acknowledge it. Well, it's like I often have people who have spirit trying to get their attention, and I say to them, well, look, it's like if somebody's standing in the room, if you're standing in the room and somebody's in front of you and you're doing everything you can to get their attention and they're totally ignoring you, how would you feel?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And spirit is just human without the body. So, and all he wants, I feel, is just to be acknowledged. And I bet you'll find that if you do that, that things will settle down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that it's overly, not that you have a lot of issues with it, but I and also, you can set boundaries with spirit. You can set boundaries with him. Like, obviously it's his home and he doesn't want to leave. And I get the feeling it's male, that you can say to him, look, just don't scare the ladies.
Right.
Don't make them feel creeped out.
Yeah. That's a really good, because that is what I would say.
Yeah.
I only want people to feel comfortable there.
Yeah.
And people just come out and ask, oh, has anyone else experienced this? And oh yeah.
Yeah. And I don't feel that it's his intention to make woman feel uncomfortable, or to make anybody feel uncomfortable. It's just he wants to be acknowledged.
Yeah, right. And you're right. How human is that?
Yeah, very human. Yeah. So that's really awesome. So now there was one other story in your book that I'm only going to touch on really briefly, and it's again about your haunted objects. It's the desk with the lights.
Desk, right. So this was back in Wrigleyville, and that's because the Reader's Digest of this is that I always call it. This is a story of someone who's not returning something. And also how I tell the story is, I think, kind of different than most, and oftentimes I try to look at different ways to tell a story. That's what I've learned through the book too, is when I was writing it. And this is really about a woman who, that's how I know the story. Mm-hmm. It's a woman who contacted me that she had bought a desk from us and didn't want to return it, but she wanted to know more about it. And what I knew about it was that I'd sold it before and it had been returned before. And that person didn't want to talk about why they were returning it. It was just, you need to take this back. And that when I bought it, the older man I bought it from couldn't wait to get rid of it. And it was a really good deal, which seemed like this desk should be worth a lot more money. Why is he selling it so cheap? Because he just wanted it to go.
Right.
So the last person who purchased it is this couple, and when they got it home, well, the other thing about the desk, we don't want to give too much away, but it was so great. So behind all the drawers in the bottom were all these weird marks, and it was like burnt into the wood. And it would be, we always called it, was like, as if it was old English hieroglyphics. It was nothing like any language I'd ever seen. I didn't know what it meant. But when you put the drawers in a certain way, you could see from the back, but it seemed to tell a story. I mean, there was a thing for a paragraph, and then the line would start. So it was a very interesting desk. It was a partner's desk. So that means there's drawers on both sides. And when this couple bought it, they had some paranormal things happen to them, which is why they were calling. So that was the drawers opening on them by themselves. At one time, one door completely coming out, like on its own. Not that they ever saw it happen. They would just come into the room and there it would be.
Right.
So that was why they were contacting us. And then, we're going to give the whole story, but part of it was that the other thing I knew about it was that when we had it, again, I didn't see this, I had employees, and when it was in the basement of our store, and they had seen the drawers open and little orbs of light shoot out all over the room. And again, there's no windows. This was one going, and at the time I didn't believe them. I didn't understand it. And I liked both of them a lot, and they were really good employees. So it seemed odd it was an odd thing. And then also because the only thing they agreed upon was this, because they didn't really get along themselves. And that made me think that there was something to it. So, I'm telling this out of order, sorry, but
That's all
the
right.
woman wanted an explanation of what I knew about it. And I'm going, this is what I know about it. I don't have all the answers. I'm just telling you what I know. She wasn't calling to return it and never did return it. But I go back to what we started with. The objects decide who's going to buy them. And this woman had searched for this type of desk because her grandmother had this desk when she was growing up. And she wanted it. This is what she wanted. This was where it was supposed to go. Not to the other people who'd owned it and didn't want it. This was wanted. Again, like, somebody wants this kitten or puppy. It's this love thing. And so she was thrilled with it. Not so thrilled that, it was apparently haunted in some respect. But then it just became a part of the house. It was just, it's a part of their life, and kind of an exciting part, actually. So
I would say so.
Yeah, it meant no harm. She has a very entertaining desk, and I got a story out of it. So hey, it's a win-win, right?
Win-win. What I was just going to say. So, did you ever find out what the markings,
No. And I've showed any number of dealers that came in, and no. Yeah, I should have taken pictures at the time. When we were doing these things, there's so much stuff. There's stuff coming every day. Now that was particularly unusual, but it could certainly have been. People. There are people now that create their own languages.
Mm-hmm.
That people do that. Very creative people. So it very well could have been that.
It could have been, or it could have been some esoteric sort of thing.
It could have been some folk arty, exercise, because it was certainly a desk at the turn of the century. Clearly, it had been there all forever. But what was cool about it was that when you looked at the desk, you didn't see it. It's only when you took it all apart, it's behind all the drawers and the bottom of each drawer. And again, and then even like she had said, it seemed like if you didn't put the drawers in the right way, the story would be different.
That's interesting.
Right?
Very interesting.
So that might be also why there was activity. If it wasn't, they need to be aligned.
Yeah. It had to be in, Very interesting. So, what made you decide to write your book?
I've written all types of things with no success for most of my life. And I was in a writing class in New York, which I was really lucky to get into. And I wrote an article, I wrote a story. You had to do the writing right there in the class. I'll tell this quick.
Right.
You had to do it right there in the class. So there's no preparation. And it all had to be true stories. It was not a fiction class. It's all nonfiction stories. So, and every week we would come to this woman's house, and there was a dozen of us, and we would do this. And every week I would usually be like in the top 3. I mean, she'd tell you, you write out topics, and then she'd pick one, right? And I was kind of rocking it. And there were some amazing people, extremely talented people in this group. And then this one week, I wrote the story because I'd never written about what I do. But I thought, oh, you know what? This is the time. I'm going to do this. And people said, bullshit. You can't write fiction. This didn't happen. And I go, no, it happened. And everybody called me out on it that I just made this up. And here, I've been there with other people. It wasn't a paranormal story, but it turned out to be a rather prescient story. And afterwards, it was a great class, and I still did well with it. And I came away and I thought, I screwed up. I didn't tell it right. I didn't write it well enough, is what I said to myself, that I need to write this well enough so that when people read it, they go, yes, and they get it. And I did that, and on just a fluke, I sent it to the New York Times, who then published it. And it's called Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. And you can Google that. It's free out there on the internet. Traces of a Man Who Disappeared. It's a little political. Doesn't mean to be. It just happened to be, given the time and the topic. And that was it. I said, I'm onto something here. I need to write more about what I do.
Yes.
Sorry, long answer.
No, that's great. That's great.
The opening chapter of the book. Yeah.
And then you got this awesome book, which is doing quite well for you, I understand.
Yeah, it's third printing. It sells very well around Halloween. Who figured?
Not surprisingly.
It was the number one vintage book in the USA and Canada, which is crazy for a vintage book to do. First podcast I was on, it was on in Australia.
Oh, wow.
That I did. And then it was on the charts in Australia. So, and now it's been out for 2 years. So, and it's still selling and people still contact me, and it's been a lovely experience.
It's awesome. And I really love the way your sense of humor comes through the book the whole way. Honestly, there were times when I was just reading and I was just chuckling the whole time. And I could see, like, you have a very dry, witty sense of humor that I absolutely love. Almost verging on the sarcastic. And I really like that. I really like that sort of humor.
I'm writing about sometimes things that are difficult. This is very much the vintage business is a business of endings.
Yes.
But I've heard that people say it's like being with me. It's like if we went out for drinks and I told you a story.
Exactly, right? Exactly. That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like when I was reading it felt like I was sitting opposite you and you were telling me these stories. That's exactly how it felt. I agree with that entirely.
I think I'm not too transparent. I think that's just here it is.
No, it's awesome. And I do believe you actually haven't finished your writing journey. I do believe that you've got more to come.
I've been knocking things around. It's been a tough time for everybody, as of late, just keeping everything safe and everybody going.
Yeah.
I've been working on another book. I'm not really one for repeating myself. So I think it's going to be similar but different.
Yes.
But I do think in a way I kind of stumbled onto something, because people do like hearing these stories.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's going to be just like this was a bit of a hybrid, of a memoir. It's absolutely an odd book. When I had finished it and it was, pitching it around, and people said, well, 99% of all the books on our antiques are about like identifying what something is and what it's worth.
Right.
And now, having read it, that's not this book.
Absolutely
like
not.
That. No. So, but I can still talk about the business, but I don't talk about money. A little bit, but really not much. That's not what it's about.
Yeah, no, it's not what it's about. It's about your journey and your growth and your development as a person and as a business is what it's about, and your personal experiences along the way. It's really fascinating reading, and I encourage all my listeners to check this out and go and get it for themselves. It's a really good read. It will have you laughing. There are bits that will make you feel emotional as you feel for the people in the book, but it's really, really a good read, and I absolutely loved it. I did.
Marianne,
and honestly, when I first got it, I thought, antiques, I don't know. I mean, I'm all into secondhand things and recycling, but actually it wasn't at all dry. It was humorous, it was funny, it was touching. It was in parts a little bit scary. Some might find some of the experiences a wee bit scary, the ones that you went into, but not for me, but some might find it that way. But it's a really overall a great read, and you are so interesting to talk to, and I can't wait to hear what you do next.
Thank you. I will let you know.
Next book. Yeah, please do, because I'll really, really be interested in reading your next book. And I know things are very, very difficult for you all over in the States at the moment with the COVID, and I know that you're in Chicago, which is not where you generally live, but you can't get home because...
No flying.
No flying, yeah. It's a bit difficult for you guys. And I want to acknowledge that I know how difficult it is for you out there. Here in New Zealand, we are very fortunate. We're just going about our lives like normal. Like we're having parties, we're having funerals, we're having, we can go out to the beach and not worry. But even people in Australia can't.
No.
So we're very lucky here. And because we're so isolated and insulated from the rest of the world, I forget how difficult it is for you all out there. And I just want to acknowledge that. Did I just see a dog go by? I just saw a tail in the corner, I think.
You did?
Yeah.
No dog.
No dog?
I don't have a dog.
You don't have a dog?
I don't have a dog.
Did you have a dog?
Yeah, I used to have a dog.
What was it? Kind of a tannish color?
Yeah, really. That would be Snookums. Oh my!
Seriously, I just saw a dog's tail go by. A tan-colored dog's tail, fluffy.
Wow. Nope.
How lovely!
Wow.
Wow. Oh, I was going to say, can you
We're
put one
talking about her.
second?
No, she's been gone.
Oh, well, there you go. So she's still around you. There you go. Holy moly. Ah, I didn't expect that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I mean, I'm not sorry.
That's,
wow.
That's lovely. Wow. Nope.
That's
I haven't talked about her in years. And
you know what? I bet it's in the video. I'll have a look in the video, and if I can find it, I'll clip it and send it to you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, on that wonderful note.
There's a first.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Duane. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I knew I was going to enjoy it when I read your book. I knew that you were going to be very easy to talk to.
Oh, yes, as are you. This has been just joyous. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Duane specifically asked me to leave in the content about me seeing his wee dog. When we were talking on Zoom, I could see on the video that he had this beautiful Art Deco screen behind him, but at the left-hand bottom of that screen was a small gap that showed part of the floor of the room behind him. It was in that gap that I clearly and unmistakably saw the fluffy, fast-wagging tail of a tan-coloured dog walking past the screen, just going about his business. As we'd pretty much concluded our interview, I was going to ask him to call the dog in so I could get a good look at it. So I was absolutely shocked when that conversation ensued. It's not often that I see spirit of any description, human or animal, as clearly as I saw Snookums. It was an incredibly touching and a wonderful validation for Duane that his beloved and his sister's beloved dog continued to be around him in spirit, and a great way to end our conversation in this episode. I really enjoyed my conversation with Duane, and I'm grateful to him for his time and that I was able to give back to him in a way that meant so much to both of us. Be sure and join us in 2 weeks when I have a follow-on episode on haunted items, some very well known and others not so. It'll be a very interesting episode, so if you're not subscribed to our podcast, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now so you don't miss out at all. This episode's music was called Strange Things from J. Urban. Before I close this episode, I want to give a shout out to these patrons of our show for their wonderful financial support of the Walking the Shadowlands podcast. The Reverend Mary, Michelle, Duncan, Kylie, Kelly, Helen and Mish. If you want to become a patron of the show, then head over to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. As a patron, you get access to a special members-only page on the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com, from which you can download full transcripts of each episode. Also, you have access to some interview bits that may not make it on the episodes, and little extras as I have time to create and add them for you. Like this week, I added the video of me talking about Snookums. You also get early access to the shows before everyone else gets to hear them. Also, you have my absolute gratitude and appreciation. So, what are you waiting for? Go to patreon.com/MCC15 and sign up now. The continued support of all my patrons makes it possible for me to financially cover part of the cost of producing this show for you all. So thank you all so much. If you have any suggestions for topics you might like me to cover in upcoming episodes, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Or if you have any questions, suggestions, or any comments that you'd like to make, or experiences that you might like to share with myself or my audience, or if you feel you might be a good fit as a guest on my podcast, then just email me at shadowlands@yahoo.com or check out the Be a Guest page on the podcast website. Check out our Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands, our Instagram feed of the same name, and our Twitter feed at Shadowlands10. Like and follow for hints on our upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a positive rating and don't be shy to leave a written review on your chosen podcasting platform or on the podcast Facebook page, Walking the Shadowlands. And of course, so you don't miss out on any episode, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. This podcast is available on all free podcasting platforms and iHeartRadio as well. Also, if you have Alexa, simply say these 4 words, "Open Walking the Shadowlands," and Alexa will play our latest episode for you. If you don't have a smartphone, then you can listen to the episodes from the podcast website, www.walkingtheshadowlands.com. For those hearing impaired, there's a full written transcript of each episode on the website, so you don't miss out at all. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your workmates about our show. Encourage them to listen and to subscribe also. The more, the merrier. Thank you so much for listening today, tonight, whatever time it is, wherever you're living in this beautiful world of ours. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks for listening.